Hello, my name is Lauren Wild, and I am the host of this podcast, Weaving the Wild. Thank you for joining me today as I'm recording this. It is Wednesday, July the 12th, 2023. And I find it to be a time to do some sharing of what I'm noticing coming through, being channeled to me right now. And then also some things to keep in mind and be able to know how to prepare for with some of the pretty large amounts of astro weather that is coming our way over the remainder of July. So let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, if you're driving or you are sitting or whatever you're doing, let's just take a moment to settle in. So if you're driving, obviously don't close your eyes. If you are not driving, just take a moment to find an easy seated position. Put your hands facing down on your thighs for grounding effect. Close your eyes and take an inhale and roll the shoulders up to the ears. Breathe in. And a nice big exhale, roll the shoulders down. Bringing your awareness into the present moment as we begin. Thank you. All right. So my name is Lauren Wild, and I'm a professional astrologer and shamanic practitioner. I'm an expert at reading astrology charts and being a bit of a planetary antenna for the collective that is part of the genius that my chart gave me, my soul chose in this lifetime. That also comes with a lot of responsibility and drain. And it's a good way to kind of move into the conversation that I really want to talk about today, which it's like a good segue, and that is resentment. Okay. We are, as of today, in the middle of Cancer season. It's 20 degrees of Cancer today. And that means that we've gotten really into kind of like that peak energy regarding Cancerian energy. And Cancer is ruled by the moon. It is very changing. Its archetype is the mother, the nurturer, the caregiver of the zodiac. And she's very wise. She's very intuitive. She's very nurturing. But also her moods can be ever changing. And one of the things that Cancer can do when it is unconscious is it can give and give and give until it really resents the person that it's giving to. One of the other things that Cancer can do is, because it's so intuitive and knows how to intuit other people's needs, it expects other people to do the same. And oftentimes Cancer can be very passive in asking for boundaries to be respected or for a break or anything like that. So a nice visual is like, a mom that has kids and a partner and is trying to cook dinner and is trying to make a part-time living or even a full-time living, and also wash the clothes and wash the dishes and clean up and do a lot of the mental and emotional load is very held by Cancer. And what eventually happens over time is that Cancer can become resentful. And I shared about this on Instagram last week, and I want to share this as a relatively short teaching, but it's a potent one. And that is this: when we feel resentment in our bodies, when we become aware that we resent something or someone, it is an opportunity to recognize where there should be a boundary put in place. I'll say that again. When we feel resentment, we recognize that where there should have been a boundary, it got crossed, right? So slowly but surely over time, a boundary that should have been set and reinforced did not. And it brings me to want to talk about boundaries and the cardinal signs, okay? Because over the next couple of days, like I said, today's July the 12th, on the 17th, we have the nodal axis shift from Taurus and Scorpio into Aries and Libra. And that's an important time because the North Node is going to be in Aries, which is, the initiator, the independent one, It can be very mad. It can be very irritable. It really has like this ability to move in its own time, which is usually fast. And it's a trailblazer. It's the first zodiac sign, which makes it very much like an initiatory energy. But the one thing about the one thing about Aries is that Aries is very much like sprinter energy. It can put a lot of energy behind something, but not for a very long amount of time. Okay. So when we look to one of its other cardinal signs, it's Capricorn. Capricorn is known for its endurance and persistence to start something and finish it. Why that's important is because when we move, when the stars and the nodes, which the nodes are not stars and they're not planetary bodies, they are shadows of the ecliptic. They're shadows of the eclipse. Wherever the nodal axis is where the eclipses are for the next 18 months. And so when the North Node moves into 29 degrees of Aries on the 17th, the South Node subsequently moves into 29 degrees of Libra because they're opposite one another. And then immediately it's going to square Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn. So we've got this really heavy energy, especially as the sun is about to move into 29 degrees of Cancer, which means we will have a fixed cardinal square in the heavens. It's big energy, guys. It's big destiny energy. It's very face your fears. It's very like what's going to topple, what systems need to crumble, what top-down things need to, be reworked. Where do you need to be brave and move into some new energy with Aries? With Libra, it's very much about like what relationships are ripe and ready to be like picked and harvested, and like what needs to die on the vine, right? Like what needs to be pruned away. And it's a very interesting time because, the North Node in Aries is one of my favorites. And Jan Spiller wrote the best book on nodal astrology, in my opinion. And she says the North Node in Aries is constructive self-interest, AKA like learning how to be constructively selfish, learning how to say, I need independence, I need time, I need space, I need to worry about me, I need to develop my sense of self. Whereas the South Node, right, because there's a North Node that can happen in Libra too, it'll just be 10 years from now, which is about developing healthy relationships and partnerships. But when the South Node is somewhere, it is the karmic release point. It is the tail of the dragon. It's the thing that is like primed and ready for purge and for karmic release. So any relationships that are not aligned, any relationships that are not equal will be very tested during the next 18 months with the South Node in Libra. Will very much test relationships. So it's an important time to recognize where the North Node goes tells us about what the collective is trying to develop, it's trying to move towards, and where the South Node is, it tells us where we're starting to release things. So on a collective level, we might see more of this, like, I need to focus on me. It can look very like self-interest. We've also got Chiron in Aries, so it can be very like a large drive towards personal healing that we could see in about 6 months from now. The other thing is that Aries rules the military, and it rules war, and it rules weapons. And so for those of us here in America, we may see some gun reforms, fingers crossed. And we may also hear a lot about guns and weapons because that's what Aries rules, as well as the police, the military, and emergency services. With the South Node in Libra, it will look a lot like relationships coming to an end, like ones that need to come to an end, coming to an end, really like losing their power, losing their steam. It can also be a karmic release, which is like some sort of karmic story, especially because Libra rules marriage, is this aspect of like, will a relationship evolve? Will it take new shape? Will it take new form? But when the South Node lands on something like Pluto, which we've got, the next generation that if your Pluto is in Libra, like the South Node's coming for you, right? And it's going to ask you to evolve your relationships, and Pluto says evolve or die. So we're going to see a lot of marriages, taking new forms, new shapes, really evolving into something different. We could see a lot of ends of relationships, a lot of ends of partnerships, specifically due to imbalances in reciprocity in the relationship, for sure. And so why I bring all of this up is to really put it under the banner of resentment. We got to kind of like bring it back around to this conversation. So when we have a resentment for something, someone, some situation, it lets us know that there's a boundary that needs to be put in place. And that brings me to stating like, well, what's a boundary, right? And let's say this before we close out this North Node conversation, is that you cannot spell boundaries without Aries, okay? But a boundary is an energetic thing, right? It's an energetic, kind of like a ritual, honestly, that we are meant to set to keep us safe, to keep us protected. They're not meant to be weaponized. They're not meant to be used to control people. Boundaries are meant to be held and enforced by ourselves, and a true boundary has consequences. So let's talk about that. For example, like, I don't know if you guys follow anything on social media, but like Jonah Hill has been kind of getting crucified for setting boundaries with his surfer girlfriend. And she shared like the text that was like his boundaries. And it's so easy to see how boundaries can get convoluted, right? And just be these very strong like boxes and structures that you want to put people in to behave a certain way. Boundaries don't work like that. The way that a boundary works is something like this. I'm not going to listen to you comment to me about my weight. I'm not open to hearing your opinion about my weight. If you do comment on my weight, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to leave the conversation. If you keep doing it, I'm going to have to stop this relationship to protect myself, right? So what happens is that we state a need. We give person the permission to follow that boundary, and then we uphold it. Boundaries are not expectations for other people beyond just respecting the boundary that you set. So when we set a boundary, it's our job to uphold them. It's our job to have a consequence and then keep to the consequence on the other side of it. But what happens, not to go into like all about boundaries, I mean, that's the majority of the work that I end up doing with female identified folks is usually boundary work, because what we have to understand about boundaries is that oftentimes we don't have boundaries because we don't know our own worth. We don't know our own value. We don't recognize those things. But what we can recognize is what stored anger and resentment feels like in our bodies. So it's a great way to stop and recognize like, okay, I really am starting to resent this person. I don't want to be around this person. Why do I not want to be around this person? We might recognize that every time we're around this person, they make a comment about our body. And so what will happen is slowly but surely we'll build resentment for that person. And so what we can do to protect ourselves and also the goodness of the relationship is say, this is an off-limit topic for me, right? Cancer season is also very much about mother wounds. So it is also a great time to set boundaries with parents that are like, listen, I'm going to come over, but in no way, shape, or form am I going to open up about my divorce process until I feel ready. If you start pushing me about my divorce process or asking my child, like trying to sidewind your way into asking my child for information, we will leave and we will not be staying with you for XYZ amount of time until the behavior changes, right? So it's like, we are not trying to hurt people by saying, if you don't do what I want you to do, then you don't get access to me. It is about stating, I need to protect myself because this hurts me. So by me protecting myself in this way, it allows for me to not resent you in the future and us to have a healthy relationship. There is no sign that needs to do that more so than Cancer, because Cancer takes on everybody's responsibility. And it really does go thankless. Like as a mother with children, I will tell you, like, I'm constantly serving my family. I am constantly carrying mental load that nobody thinks about. And because nobody thinks about it, they don't even say thank you about it, right? And I can easily get into a place of being a victim. And and feeling like nobody appreciates me, which is one of the number one triggers for a Cancer in the first place. And so one of the things that is a powerful thing to offer you as the North Node starts to move into Aries, and we start to be asked to identify what is our core sense of values, who are we, who do we want to be, what is true to us, what are our values, because Jupiter's moving through Taurus, which is expanding our sense of values. This is a powerful 18-month portal to true self-development and health. But if not, we can just turn into the victims of other people's things and try to weaponize a boundary, and it's not really appropriate, right? And so the South Node in Libra would ask us, like, do I want to be right, or do I want to be in relationship, right? Like, can these things be repaired? Can there be reciprocity? Can there be healing? And at the end of the day, it's usually is going to turn out to be boundaries that need to be set and upheld with love and compassion. So not to get too squirrely around that, but a lot of this came up for me because of my own resentments that I started to experience around my work. And I love my work. You know, I get to do all of this healing work with these incredible people and be a part of their stories and their evolutions. But being in service to the collective during these heavy times and putting yourself out there in such transparent and vulnerable ways has an effect on you. And, you know, last fall, I got shingles. And currently right now, I'm also dealing with some health related issues. And most of it comes from the channeling that I do and its effect on my nervous system. And what I've had to learn is that in order for me to sustain the work that I do, I have to slow down. I can't move as fast. I need structures that allow me space to breathe so I can recover my channel. And slowly but surely, I realized I was starting to become a victim of my work, resentful of my work and what it was asking of me. And I realized I had to take responsibility and I had to set boundaries with my own work. It was no person. It was me. It was me and my expectations and the way that I was structuring things that put me in the place that I was in. I had to recognize and I had to take responsibility that I couldn't keep going in the way that I was going. So, you know, early this year, I decided that I was going to take some trainings. I was going to gain some new skills, and I was going to restructure the way that I do my business in a way that supports me and allows me space to breathe. And I'm very glad to say that it's going well. It's moving in the right direction, and I'm grateful for that. But the most important thing is to name, like, even as a person that's teaching consciousness, I got myself caught in the same rut as any other person would. And I had to take responsibility for that. I had to take responsibility for getting to a place of feeling like a victim of being in spiritual leadership again, right? Like, how deep does the white savior complex really go? It goes really deep. But, you know, I had to stop. I had to take a break. I had to detach. I had to do some pretty intense inventory of what do I love to do and what is draining me. And that is something that I encourage you to do as well, is to do, excuse me, I'm gonna take a sip of water really quick. To do an inventory of what is it that you still love, right? Like, when you think about the thing that brings you into a place of victimhood and resentment, what are the things that you still love? What are the things worth keeping, right? Like, how do we dive in and go deeper instead of wider? And then how do you cut away all of the things that are no longer serving you, right? And I think that it really boils down to your values. What are the things that are going to be long-standing? That takes us to like Jupiter in Taurus kind of energy, right? So what are your values, and what's going to be sustainable for you? What's going to give you the time to be able to sustain yourself, pay your bills, you know, the things that we need to do in this post-capitalistic hellscape that we all committed to being here during this time. What do we have to do, and what can we do to get some space and to rest on the other side of that so we can keep going? Oftentimes people will ask me, because I'm an astrologer, like, when is the insanity going to end? And I say all the time, it's not. We're in this. Like, this is our new normal. I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about all of the floods and the fires and what we would consider to have been extreme weather even 6 months ago. They're now calling normal. They're saying we need to radically accept that the floods, the disasters, the poor air quality, the fires, all of this is our new normal, right? And we have to recognize that we're moving into a period of time in human evolution where we need to know how to run an endurance game. This is not a sprint. This is now starting to move into a place of like, how is humanity going to sustain the amount of consumption that we've done in the last 100 years that is going to affect humanity forever, right? And a lot of people are not willing to talk about that yet. Not a lot of people are willing to deal with the earth grief, right? But our bodies know it to be true. And our bodies need us to move into ways that are sustainable, to care for our nervous systems, to care for our bodies, to care for the earth, to slow down and to conserve and to do less consuming. And in order to do that, we have to make space, because so many of us have been playing this, capitalist consumer rat race all of our lives, that it really takes something like sickness or something like a divorce or something really epic to force us to slow down and face our burnout, to have to recover. And hopefully you guys don't have to do that or haven't had to do that. I did, still do, still recovering from it. And I'm grateful for my body that it knows how to survive. And, I should have expected there to be reparations that I have to make with my body on the other side of that hustle. But Jupiter in Taurus and the North Node in Aries are going to ask us how we're going to create sustainability to care for ourselves. How are we going to make boundaries to care for ourselves? Where do we need to cut off the toxic, unbalanced relationships and commitments that we have, the contracts that we have, to make more space and time for ourselves? It could look like a period of 18 months of relative isolation and a lot of self-growth and a lot of self-work, which isn't the worst thing. If anything, I'm a big believer in Carl Jung's process known as individuation. However, at some point we have to stop individuating and merge back into the collective, right? We can go in and out of that, but this is a big individuation piece that's going to be coming down the pipe. Okay. So if I could give you any piece of advice, it would be to take a pretty rigorous inventory of what do you love and what do you resent? What do you resent but still love? What are the pieces about it that you love and what are the pieces about it that you resent? And to start moving slowly but surely, Jupiter and Taurus, to start moving slowly but surely in the direction of releasing anything that is dead weight and starting to put your energy into the things that need to be built, which are sustainable. They have space to breathe and they allow for self-growth and independence. Okay. All right, my friends, I hope that this episode has been helpful for you. If you want to learn more, you can check out my website, laurenwild.com. My apprenticeship hybrid is now called the Wild and Rooted Mentorship. I renamed it, is going to be starting on Lunacid, which is August the 1st. We're only a couple of weeks away from the harvest season, our first harvest season. I was taking my kids to camp yesterday out in the country, and they were already cutting down the wheat. They're already like sheathing the wheat. And I was like, wow, okay. The corn is getting really tall. I live in Ohio. The corn is getting really tall. And it's like, where are we starting to move into the harvest? What are we starting to reap from Beltane, May 1st? Taking a moment to really think about like what has already started to come into awareness and completion and what needs to be carried into the release part of the year. Where do we have grief and where do we have gratitude, right? And we would not have grief if we did not have gratitude. So I hope that this is helpful for you guys, and I will see you next time. Okay, bye.